You know what they say about America? Everything's bigger. And as a British Canadian mongrel who grew up in the UK, I can certainly say that when I moved to the US 9 years ago, everything really was larger. From the houses to the cars and the portion sizes. Getting used to the US's penchant for larger takes some time, and while documentaries like Super Size Me helped highlight the way in which portion size creep has helped contribute to America's obesity pandemic, America's cars and trucks have continued to grow, and that, in turn, has increased the size of vehicles in other markets, as large becomes the new mid-size and small becomes something of a curio. As we've covered plenty on the channel before, though, if you want an efficient EV that uses as little energy as possible to move you and your things down the road, you need an EV that's not approximately the size of a small English hamlet, but is instead, as those on this side of the Atlantic might call it, bijou. Then there's plenty of demand, at least if those of you who comment on this channel are representative of the general public, for smaller, more efficient EVs. We've seen it in our consulting efforts too, folks who aren't buying EVs yet because seemingly every new EV to market is just too extra for their needs. So, if there's demand, people want them, why are small EVs generally not selling so well? Who's to blame? Is it really their small size? Or is it something else? Let's find out. We've seen an inexorable push towards ever larger vehicles in the last 40 years, and the EV world is no exception. We've complained here at length about how many EVs today, like the Honda Prologue or Chevrolet Blazer EV, for example, are offering ranges that aren't that far off the ranges being offered 6 or 7 years ago by cars like the Chevrolet Bolt EV. The difference between then and now? The newer models have a much larger battery pack to go with a larger frame and have an energy efficiency that it's at least a tick or two down on previous generation EVs. Many in the industry will tell you that there's no demand for smaller, more efficient models, and indeed we're seeing evidence of that in some areas in the North American and sometimes even European markets. Ford's struggling with sales of its mid-size Explorer and recently launched Capri EV in Europe, and Stellantis, current owner of Fiat, has yet again paused production of the Fiat 500e due to concerns about market demand. But is it really because people don't want small EVs, or is there something else at play here that people aren't honestly discussing in the industry? Because I have thoughts. I know, I have lots of thoughts, and some are not popular, like the fact that spinach and pineapple on pizza are totally awesome, or the fact that cricket is by far the best bat-based ball sport that exists. I mean, where else are you going to get to hear that the batsman's holding the bowler's willy? Or that a maiden was bowled over? Or that someone just delivered a googly that was met by a batsman on one knee who lofted it up over the midfield for 6? But I also have opinions and thoughts about the whole small EV thing, so meet me at the main camera. Of course, many people will cite crash test results on how smaller cars are less safe than larger cars, but the real world is very much less clear-cut. Crash tests aren't always accurately portraying the real-world collisions that vehicles have, and while basic physics does come into play in collisions between large and small vehicles, inelastic collisions may result in some loss of energy to friction, but the smaller, lighter vehicle will always come off worse. There's also other physics to bear in mind that crash tests often don't take into consideration, like stopping distances, for example. Crash tests also don't take into account the fact that the types of collision and the likelihood of survival vary from vehicle type to vehicle type. You are less likely to have certain types of accidents in a small vehicle, such as an off-road impact or a rollover, but you're also more likely to die in a head-on collision. And in terms of overall fleet safety, the safest crash is between two small light vehicles, so yeah, Since all of this could be a video in its own right, though, let's leave that topic here and instead focus on small versus big in terms of build, cost and capabilities, because I think genuinely this is the reason why when people still maintain they want small car choice, the reality is that many people aren't choosing smaller EVs. And for that, let's start with packaging. Automakers have, for many years, praised how EVs are capable of offering next class up interior volume when compared to gasoline vehicles. And that's usually a byproduct of the fact that a well-built EV keeps all of its business down bottom and lets you party up top. Okay, yeah, that sounded better in my head than it did in my mouth. I'll admit it. I'm old. That sounded... yeah. While the niceties of well-designed EV packaging results in plenty of luggage space for compact and larger-sized vehicles, there's a point at which vehicle frame constraints mean there's room for a battery pack and not a lot else. This is especially true when combined with automakers' other current obsession, putting the largest possible wheels on and damn the consequences to Hades. The consequences there are, obviously, are less passenger volume. There's a good reason that the original Mini had specially made very small tyres on specially made very, very small rims. Bigger wheels equals lower efficiency and less space-efficient packaging. The previous generation Mini Cooper SE and both first and current generations of the Fiat 500e are perfect examples of that. Their physical limitations meant getting a massive battery pack between the axles wasn't particularly easy, and while interior space might have been no less than in a comparable ICE variant, was just not the usual one-segment up jump that larger EVs can enjoy. If you've been told that EVs tend to offer more interior space than their gasoline counterparts, that can be a little bit of a letdown to find that the smallest EVs, for the most part, don't offer any improvements in interior volume over gasoline variants. There's no frunk space, often because of the limitations of shared platforms, and underhood areas tend to be a little chaotic, because an engineer has been told to design for low cost rather than maximisation of space. For some buyers, that's not a complete turn-off. It wouldn't be for me, because I like small cars. But what is a turn-off? Well, that's the biggest problem I see with small cars. How automakers view and place EVs in the market in general. A decade ago, we had some truly cracking EVs in the marketplace that were in the subcompact segment. In the US, we had the Chevrolet Spark EV and Fiat 500e. Both were, in their own special ways, little pocket rockets of joy that didn't nanny the driver when it came to power delivery, as has unfortunately become the norm today. They could bomb around the urban jungle all day, leaving you with an immense smile on your face from ear to ear. And in the case of the Fiat 500e, while it didn't have any fast charging, although the Spark EV did have it as an optional extra, it was still a fun car to drive. Sure, their range per charge was abysmal by modern standards, 70 to 85 miles on a good day, 112 to about 135 kilometres. But honestly, that didn't matter much because those vehicles focused on doing the one thing and the one thing only that they were good at, be low-cost around-town motoring. I, of course, should acknowledge that affordable wasn't exactly the class that either of those vehicles fit into when new. They were both firmly compliance cars built exclusively to meet zero-emission vehicle mandates. The late Sergio Marchionne, former CEO of Fiat, once famously stated he didn't want people to buy the Fiat 500e because it lost the company money every time one was sold. But for round-town used models, they were cheap to keep on the road, didn't have a lot of complexity, and were bare bones enough that you could chuck them around town with nary a worry. These earlier, smaller, compact EVs didn't try to compete with larger, longer-legged EVs. They focused on offering a niche market solution that helped with a whole lot of people's needs. And that helped with those vehicles' charm. But since then, the small EV has become a whole lot more complicated, because that's what automakers seem to think EVs need to be. For example, take any EV from any automaker on sale today and it is chock to the brim with onboard tech. From complicated telematic systems to OTA capabilities, these vehicles add a lot of extra weight and complexity that their predecessors, for the most part, didn't have. In larger vehicles, that might help entice customers in, but in smaller vehicles of any sort, which traditionally haven't been about anything other than fun, usable daily driving, it raises that sticker price upwards. I mean, take, for example, the bizarreness of the Aston Martin Cygnet, a car which was basically a Toyota IQ, or a Scion IQ if you prefer, but completely stripped back to its perfunctory parts and then filled to the brim with hand-stitched leather and suede. It then had an Aston Martin badge slapped on it and a few zeros added to its price. Very few sold. Aston Martin made it because it wanted a way to allow its customers to circumvent the London congestion charging rules at the time, which penalised large, polluting vehicles. But the reality was that most of the customers who wanted to drive an Aston Martin in London didn't want a small Toyota in drag. They wanted to just drive their DB9 and then pay the bloody fines. In the same way, most people who want a small car don't actually want a car that's got more tech than the bridge of the Enterprise D, even if they are a Star Trek fan. Need an example in the EV world? Take the Fiat 500e in its latest guise. This currently paused production model packs in not one, not two, but 3 door actuators. You have the rear hatch release, something I'm going to forgive Fiat for because tailgate hatch releases have been a thing for a long time now. But the 2 side doors? They have electromechanical door poppers and a manual door release, because the latter is required in most markets, just like a Tesla does. There's no conceivable reason why this is necessary other than the fact that somehow, somewhere, automakers have decided that small EVs must be luxury vehicles. And that, like it or not, drives up the price. Sadly, I've not had a whole lot of time behind the wheel of the current Fiat 500e because when we did have one on review, it promptly threw battery error codes as we were heading out to fill some rolling chase shots. But from the time I did spend behind the wheel, I learned one thing. It's a car that, had the price been closer to 20 or 25,000 US dollars, it would have been a total utter steal for many car fans. But adding all of those extra bells and whistles and adding special edition trim to appeal to more affluent buyers pushed the price up beyond its actual value, up into the 40s. For budget-conscious customers, which most small car buyers tend to be, that essentially makes those vehicles a complete non-starter. And it's not just small cars either. We see this in larger EVs all the time, and sometimes automakers get away with it. For example, I have lost track of the number of pickup truck buyers who've told me, in no uncertain terms, that they would buy an electric pickup truck with a large battery and a fast charging solution, and that's it. Many private buyers want the stripped-down fleet variants with the plastic trim and the hose-downable interior. Yet automakers play the, oh, we need to make this appeal to ideal buyers game, and time after time, they miss out on more budget-conscious customers, or in fact, make it impossible for those customers to buy the models they want. I think I told you recently that I was at the launch event for a luxury high-end full-size SUV. You're probably going to be able to guess which one, I think. And a member of the sales team earnestly told us that the target market was a young millennial looking to start a family. Someone who was in their early 30s with a decent job and their first home. It had a starting price of $80,000, and I was not the only one weeping into my stylish yet tasty fair trade ethically sourced vegan appetizer. Out of touch automakers love to tell customers what they want, and while focus groups are designed to be as representative of the market as possible, it is worth noting that if I put you in a room with a bunch of complete strangers and then showed you a wonderful new car design, didn't really discuss the sticker price and then ask you if you'd like to own it or not, would you say yes or no? And even if I told you the price, would you feel comfortable enough to admit that no, that vehicle was well beyond your means? Automakers might like to pretend they make the car that buyers want, but I think there's a fair amount of we can make money on this going on. And sadly, in the EV world, a fair bit of we want people to think we're serious, but we know this won't sell if we make it too expensive. And that, combined with the inexorable urge to fill every model with massive amounts of tech so that you can be sold insert name of thing as a service, means that even if you increase the range of the EV with newer battery tech, it's priced beyond the price point of what most people would consider acceptable. So, is there a solution? Yes. At least, I think there is. People who buy small cars self-select small cars. They choose small cars because they want to prioritise efficiency over luxury, low cost over gadgets, and daily driving pleasure in large cities over long distance drives. The majority of people in the world now live in urban megacities rather than suburbia or rural areas. They don't need hundreds of miles of range per day. They need low cost, fun driving. But that's not to say longer distance drivers aren't fans of small cars. The original Mini was heavily marketed on its ability to go anywhere and do anything, which included taking part in the famous Monte Carlo rally. Its flat floor and ability to carry 4 adults with ease and a tiny footprint was pretty revolutionary for its time, but as time passed, that original Mini concept from Alec Izagonis was compromised. Sometimes it was because of the need for crash test safety, and at other times because the car company convinced itself that people needed more power, more speed, and more doodads, which ultimately made the original Mini less practical and appealing for many buyers, because the interior available passenger volume actually shrunk. And when the original Mini ended production at the very end of last century, it had morphed into something of a rich person's plaything, which is where many small EVs are unfortunately placed today. If you're from an automaker and you want small EVs to make a comeback, I've got a simple message. Range around town isn't important, and many of the previous generation's smaller EVs are still doing just fine on sub-100 mile ranges. In fact, we have one on our staff car fleet. Sure, being able to recharge quickly is important, and figuring out how to fast charge with smaller battery packs is a genuine engineering challenge if you want that vehicle to have a long battery life. But gadgets aren't as important as sticker price. Fun driving dynamics round town trump unnecessary door release buttons. And for the love of all that is holy, understand that most people don't need or want subscription services in something they're likely to only spend 30 to 50 minutes in per trip. Believe me, their bigger priority is getting to or from work with as little fuss as possible, have a decent-sized cup holder for their wake-up juice, and the ability to sneak into a parking space without requiring 16 gazillion sensors. But what do I know? I'm just a grumpy Gen Xer who thinks blue sky is something we see in the Pacific Northwest when it's not raining. Thanks for joining me today, and if you've got thoughts, make sure you leave them in our Discord chat room, on our Patreon page, or you can reach out to us using Mastodon or Blue Sky. Thanks to the amazing list of people scrolling by on your screen right now. They are some of more than 1,500 people who help fund this channel using Patreon and YouTube, helping us cover our bills, pay our team, and making sure that we can remain 100% independent. If you'd like to join them and see your name listed here, just follow the links below. There are a range of different tiers you can sign up for, from as little as $1 a month, or if you pay yearly, just under $11 a year. We've had so many headaches with our credit list in the last few months. I'm sorry, it's been down to a non-functioning program we were using to pull the list out, but today's list has been manually generated, so please do let us know if you're not on there and should be. We are, after all, only human ish. A huge welcome to our newest supporters: Steve Abernathy, Mike Nichols, Zach Kane, Philip Atkins, Kat, Rob Thomas, Ryan S., Laura, Jay Alor, Celia Gonzalez, France G. France, Nicole Huang, oh yeah, Pedro Huget, Duran Valentin, Winfred Gerlach, John Trindle, Sarah Hendrika Biketon, Edward Kufka, Stephen Beatty, Jonathan Rees, MJY, Owen Patrick, and Gail Jackson. To join the list and get your shout out, become a paid Patreon member for your moment of fame. And remember, you can also now gift membership to someone else. If you'd like to support us with a one-off donation, you'll find links below to make Ko-fi and Bitcoin donations. And we even have an old-fashioned PO box you can reach us at. The address is listed below. And if you're in need of some swag, you'll find our swag store also in the down below. We've got some fantastic content coming up, so make sure you're subscribed on PeerTube or YouTube, and we'll see you very soon. We make new videos every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. If you want more, the mighty algorithm thinks you'll like this video, but we also think that you should look at this one. See you soon, and as always, keep evolving!